let's start and think about advertising. And the first image is one for an anti-wrinkling cream. This is an advert that was put out in Britain and featured Rachel Weisz, the British actress. It suggested that the image that was used in this particular instance was unrepresentative of the effects that the wrinkle cream had. Now, this is advertising. Let's just be practical about this. Yes, it contravenes some standards. They have selected a particularly photogenic image. The fact they've had to doctor it slightly does suggest that they're over-exaggerating the potential effects of the product. But no one is going to be too shocked to learn that this periodically happens and gets picked up by the appropriate authorities. When it comes to advertising, there's also what is acceptable, what's not acceptable as times change. There is fairly heavy regulation in the 21st century about tobacco advertising. But when you have an instance of an advertising company in America who has licensed the use of the Abbey Road cover by the Beatles, airbrushing out the cigarette held by Paul McCartney as they cross the zebra crossing, you get an idea of how the concerns of society have changed. That something that was a commonplace in the late 60s, in the first decade of the 21st century, can't be viewed without some alteration. Now, if we're worrying about photographs of cigarette smoking in the modern age, here is an instance which 4 and 6 have from 2005. It seems very innocuous. Clement Hurd, the illustrator of a revised edition of the children's classic book Goodnight Moon, had in the previous couple of decades been pictured on the back cover holding a cigarette. When it came to the new edition, the publishers felt it was appropriate to have the cigarette removed. And with the reluctant agreement of Mr. Hurd's family, that was done. So for something that was unacceptable it's unacceptable now, it had been let past for 2 decades. Times changed. So did the requirement of the airbrushing of the photograph. When it comes to advertising, you shouldn't necessarily be surprised that cigarettes are in or out of a photograph over time, or that a photograph may have been altered to enhance the effects of the quotes wrinkle cream unquotes on the image. But when it comes to the cover of Time magazine, you're expecting something a little bit different. And in 2007, Time magazine ran an article, How the Right Went Wrong. And it displays fairly clearly Ronald Reagan. But digitally added was a tear across his right cheek, as if Reagan was lamenting after the event how the right went wrong, so to speak. Now, Time argued that they'd made it clear at one point or other that this was a montage, but having a photograph of Ronald Reagan as opposed to a photograph of Ronald Reagan with a tear, given the headline to the article, does change the way that you are going to interpret it. So again, this is a piece of advertising which has augmented a photograph for the effect of promoting sales. Now, when it comes to magazine covers, there seems to be a very high proportion of them, especially if they're appealing to men, with young women on them. Could be women of any age, but let's be practical about this. In 2003, GQ magazine perpetrated something of a controversy. They had Kate Winslet on their cover. Kate Winslet, one of the finest actresses of her generation, was digitally altered to narrow her hips, to effectively elongate her for what was perceived to be the image requirements of the clientele. So there we have someone who is known for her abilities, her integrity as an actress. Yes, her look, she's a Hollywood star as much as anything else, but the need to change it to sell more magazines as opposed to representing her as she is. That does seem taking things a little bit far and did cause a controversy at the time.